Amazing. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Taylor. I think I've met everyone. At least we've like exchanged messages in circles. So lovely to have you all here. And I'm so glad that you're here for this amazing session, which will reframe how you think about bookkeeping and financial clarity. So we are joined by the brilliant Morgaine Trine, who is the founder of Honestly Bookkeeping and a financial operations expert with over a decade of experience helping entrepreneurs create sustainable integrity-driven systems. And Morgan has worked with founders across industries to move from that reactive to catch-up mode to proactive financial leadership. And she is known for her ability to make complex financial concepts click in a really refreshing human way. So today's session is not your typical categorize your expenses type of a talk, but it is a myth-busting podcast style conversation that explores the deeper intersection between bookkeeping, operations, and money mindset. So Morgan is here to show us how our numbers tell a story and how understanding that story can unlock smarter decisions, stronger systems, and real long-term growth. So whether your books feel messy or your systems feel chaotic, or you simply want to run your business with more clarity and confidence, you are in the right place. So Morgan, we are so thrilled to have you here with the Dreamers and Doers community today. So we'll go ahead and jump in just a moment. I'm going to flag that this is, like I said, a podcast style. We will take your questions throughout. We want to hear them all, whether you're coming off of mute or dropping them in the chat, and then we're inviting you to come off mute at the right time. Whatever it is, if you have questions and if you have specific stories related to bookkeeping and finances, we want to hear them. So definitely ask them. And I also want to share that we have had financial conversations in the past, and I've had members request the option of asking questions anonymously. So I do want to also or like asking them more in secret without having to come off mute and share it. So if there is a sensitive question that you have regarding finances and you would rather ask it without the whole group knowing or with it not being in the recording, let me know. And the way that you can do that is by creating a new chat with just me in the session. So if you go and open up the chat window, you can see where it says everyone and then one that says new chat, and you can just chat me directly and I can ask your question without sharing your identity. So if that's something that's helpful, it's here for you. But Morgan, thanks so much for hosting today.
Yeah, I am really excited about this. Thank you for that introduction, Taylor. And yeah, this is going to be really good. Um, this is like a purely Q&A type session today. I don't have slides. It's going to be mostly me talking. And so please ask your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat. Taylor will jump in if there's anything that you send to her directly. And with the group this size, also if you want to come off mute and just ask your question, go ahead. This is not the time to like hold back from asking questions. I thrive like the best when I'm asked a direct question and then can answer that and then have so much more to say also. Um, so like Taylor said, I'm Morgan Trine. I have been running Honestly Bookkeeping for the past 8 years. We're a virtual zero-only bookkeeping firm, and I've worked with a whole variety of businesses, both in terms of industry, right? So service-based, product-based, manufacturing, nonprofit, all of the different business models within that. And then also all across the US and all different sizes, right? Solopreneurs, couple of team members, a couple of employees up to, 100 plus in employee companies here. So because of that, I've seen this like really broad range of bookkeeping scenarios. And over the past, almost decade, have really pulled out these themes and have really started to see the patterns across all of the various bookkeeping scenarios and have developed a very different way to think about bookkeeping. And so my goal for this session is not the like, this is where you categorize this expense. But I hope that you come away with a perspective shift. That you come away with, I'd never thought of it that way before. Wow, that's something I had never considered. So there's going to be lots of inroads to that, but I hope that's my goal, is that perspective shift. And we're going to start with the sort of the foundational misconception that I see business owners making around bookkeeping. And I think of this as like if you know of plants that have tap roots, right? There's like one main root that goes really far down, and then the rest of the plant is built off of that one tap root. This misconception that I see is kind of like the tap root. There's so many downstream impacts of not interrogating this assumption. And so there's this one sort of root piece, and then it has just a whole smattering of implications. So we're going to start with that misconception, and then based on the questions, it'll just sort of be fleshing out the different leaves and petals of this plant to stick with that analogy. So, yeah, are we ready? Are we excited? I am. Let's go. So, the main misconception that I see is this idea that bookkeeping is just data entry. That bookkeeping is this like kind of admin task that you do for your business. And I think that resonates, a lot, that the business owners I speak to very much think about, okay, I, every month need to go in and do my bookkeeping, or let me have my VA help with, getting receipts and doing some categorizations. And two, that it also is reflected in some of the language that people use around bookkeeping, which is like, you should know your numbers as a business owner. I'm sure you all have heard that concept. Um, and that know your numbers is based in this idea of just like the bookkeeping as a task, as data entry, as let me just type in a couple of things, put in a categorization. And the reason that this is the misconception that bookkeeping is just fundamentally not data entry is because it doesn't actually reflect the reality of bookkeeping, which is that it is about understanding the tax implications of what you are doing. It is a specialized knowledge base. It is understanding when I put this expense in this category, this is how it interacts with tax law. And so that is not a data entry based decision, right? Like if you think about data entry of like, here's this Excel spreadsheet, I need you to put in this information in column G, right, from this other reference document. You can either have put that information in correctly or not, right? It's a very binary system. Data entry is you either entered it correctly or you did not enter it correctly. And bookkeeping, because it is about understanding tax law, is not you put this in correctly or you put this in incorrectly. It's did you put this in within a way that fits within the broader tax context? And so this shift is super foundational. This is the thing that starts making all of the difference. And like we don't see this, like if you think about the legal landscape, right? No one's telling you as the business owner, you should know how to write your own contracts and how to write your own partnership agreements and, how to review this other legal document. There's this understanding that it's a specialized knowledge. It's a profession. And so, you get help from a lawyer, right? You get help from someone who has that specialized knowledge. And the same is true of bookkeeping, that it is specialized knowledge. And yet the way we talk about it is not specialized knowledge, is not um is from that like admin task perspective, this binary correct or not perspective. So that's sort of that foundational misconception that I see in the business landscape and how owners sort of think about their own bookkeeping, that sort of permeates into a bunch of effects downstream. Um, so I'll sort of pause here. Is there any questions or clarifications around that piece? Awesome. So one of the things that I see then, how like that bolsters this idea that bookkeeping is not data entry, is you're shifting from a binary perspective to what I call an ecosystemic perspective. And we'll like fully dive into that in a moment. But what I want to also illustrate here is that part of this misconception also comes from like a lack of clarity around how tax law actually becomes a thing. Like when you look at your tax return, how did we actually get to this point? Um, because one of the so in the broad perspective, you have Congress and it says, hey, we want to make these like tax laws. We want to put this into effect. And it's very broad. It's very like it's that big picture, top level, overarching view. And then that law, right, gets voted into place. And then the IRS has to take that law and go, okay, how are we going to make specific guidance? And how does this already interact with the IRS guidelines and rules that are in place? And so they're having to then reconcile between the tax law and what the IRS already says and try to like make that all work. And like they create forms that try to put into effect that broader tax law. And so the IRS does that. It goes, okay, we think this is how we're going to get there. But it's very, very broad, right? Like the same law that applies to the $800,000 small business also applies to the $10 million small business. That's still small in the scheme of things, right? So that's a very wide range of like actual business operations, right? And so the IRS kind of tries to bridge that gap. And then um, tax attorneys, the big four accounting firms, other large accounting firms start suing the IRS or start coming back and being like, you didn't think through A, B, C, D, and E. What are we going to do about that? Or they go, okay, you put out this guidance, we interpreted it this way, and then we made our decision using that interpretation. Like, we think we're right, and you should amend your rules. So there's this now back and forth happening between the IRS and some of these bigger players in the accounting space because there are just too many unique scenarios across all of the businesses in the US for the IRS to like actually capture that and be able to have any sort of specificity that captures all of the stuff. It has to stay kind of at this certain level of broad broad guidance. So so then you have this, this back and forth between the IRS and the big accounting players, and then new guidance is put out that sort of clarifies that, right? And so the reason I'm using tax law as the terminology within this conversation is because it is just like any other law in the US. It is based on precedence and interpretation. And so we end up seeing as the end users these like forms, right, that seem very black and white, binary, if X then Y. But behind that is a whole bunch of case law and a whole bunch of CPAs making decisions based on their interpretation. And so this is another piece of why when you think about bookkeeping as data entry, as a binary process, you're actually missing out on the fact that the foundation of all this, the tax law of all this, is so much gray that tax law is not black and white. What becomes black and white in tax law is there's so much case law that makes it so that the interpretation is really set. And so again, when you think of bookkeeping through this binary lens, it's not reflective of what's actually happening with why you're doing bookkeeping for taxes. That both of these things are about interpretation, are about understanding sort of the end goal. It's about taking, the specific business in front of you and then going, okay, how does this fit into that broader context? Yeah. Yeah. Um, so right, so like fundamentally this shift, right, changes so many things. um, and so I think where I'm gonna go from here is talk about like the original purpose of bookkeeping and then how I conceptualize bookkeeping now, and we'll sort of move into like, okay, let's talk about operationally and like what the impact of this is.
Morgan, that sounds great. Also, as we kind of gear up for more questions later in the session, I also might just invite folks to drop in the chat just so that I know also for like when those questions come up of like, where are you at with bookkeeping and like, why did you show up today? Because clearly there's a gap there that made you say like, I want to come and learn from Morgan. Like, what was that? So that maybe we can weave that into the session as well, since we have a more intimate group here today. So that would be awesome. So if anyone wants to drop any of that, yeah, in the chat, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you. Um, yeah. So we're gonna take a step back there, like stay sort of in the industry for a moment. And the original like purpose of bookkeeping. So there's two purposes of bookkeeping in my conception, right? And the first is like we do bookkeeping because it is technically the law and we want to make sure the IRS is happy, right? um and oh, I love that, Lauren. Oh, and this will help you work with other bookkeepers and accountants and like deepen your language to be able to like speak to your team and sort of get on the same page. So I love that for having an existing team already. Um, got it. Yeah, Emily, I love that. Like handling it on your own. Um, yeah, like understanding this because I what I find is that especially that business owners who end up doing their own bookkeeping, there's a lot of like shame involved. And there's a lot of also like self-judgment that can come up. Um, or there's a lot of like confusion. Like those are sort of the three big feelings that I run across with owners that are doing their own bookkeeping. And again, I think a lot of it stems from this idea that like you should be able to do your own bookkeeping. That like there's this just like general, I don't know, like mentality in the business world of should. And that recognition that there is like this specialized piece of knowledge that's involved really helps like loosen some of that negative emotion that can arise because it takes it away from like there's something wrong about me that I can't get this to going, okay, no, this is just a knowledge gap for me. This is just something like I need to um recognize that there is like just an extra set of knowledge and skills that I'm going to be developing to engage with this, and to that like understanding that it's a lot more gray can help with some of the confusion and can help with some of the overwhelm of engaging with this on your own, right? That like when you go and start reading the IRS web pages, which is like one of the best things I think you can do if you're doing it on your own, like what is the tax form that I will be filing on? Let me read the instructions for those tax forms. And like the IRS has that all on the website. They have like definitions line by line, and like it can be overwhelming if it's the first time you're doing this, but it is all there. And then you know where you can start asking questions as you go through that. But again, it takes it away from that, like, I should just be able to do this with my own skill set, um, versus like, oh no, there's going to be some learning curve here. Um, and oh my gosh, Frida, I hate QuickBooks too. They're terrible. I have a whole YouTube video about why we don't use QuickBooks. My favorite, the only software we use is called Xero, Xero. And I could literally spend an entire hour just talking about Xero and QuickBooks. But yeah, pop in the chat if there's any specific um, questions around that. Because one of the things with QuickBooks that I'll just tap in right here is so right, bookkeeping used to be like ledgers, right? It was a whole bunch of paper ledgers, and that was a lot more of right? You were like handwriting everything out and calculating things. Like that's a much more the mechanics of that is much more traditional data entry, right? Um, And so there's a whole system of how information flows through your accounting that's based in how did people move information between a whole bunch of different paper ledgers and like paper notebooks. And what QuickBooks did is it kind of replicated all of those paper ledgers in electronic form. But one of the reasons that I love Xero, and it actually was the first cloud-based accounting software, it came on before QuickBooks Online did. Xero went, okay, we have technology that can do a lot of this like movement in the background. And so it got rid of some of the processes that you had to do when you had paper ledgers and got the back end technology to like move some of that information for you, do some of those calculations for you. And so what I find is that people who either started accounting after analog days, or business owners that have a little bit more of a tech forward perspective, Xero ends up being like a really great fit, whereas the accountants I find that used to do analog systems, they are the ones that are really loving QuickBooks because it's more of a one-to-one replication there. Yeah,
Morgan, can I chime in with another question I got?
please.
Okay, so this question is about K-1 forms. I'm
Mm,
wondering what if the company that I invested in is refusing to send me and other investors and a VC disaster a K-1 form? Is there
yeah.
a way to input that information without a K-1 form? Do you know?
Mm, yeah. So this is going to be okay. So bookkeeping and tax preparation is a Venn diagram. So, I can give you some like overarching thoughts, but the ultimate decision is going to be with your CPA. Because again, tax law interpretation, it's going to depend on how your CPA interprets the specific laws around K1. Um, so with that context, one of the things I'll say is I mean, the fact that they're refusing to give you the K1 is technically illegal. So you and the other investors might want to get legal representation around this. Um, Two, like a there's no like true workaround for not having the K1, but to at least understand like the scope of where we're talking. Um, if you have any financial statements for the year, right? So like if we're talking about 2024, like if you have a 2024 um, income statement or P&L, or if this is for 2025, like a year to date 2025 income statement P&L, um, that can tell you, right? Like, did this company, if the net income, that like bottom line amount on your P&L is, from this company is $10,000, the potential exposure here is pretty minimal. If, their net profit, net income is $1 million, that's a much bigger, potential liability here, right? So what this can do is this can tell your CPA, like, how big of deal is this really? Right? Like I invested in a company, the owner was super behind on their bookkeeping, kept telling me that it was at a loss, and like I got a previous K1 that showed a loss. So I went to my CPA and I was like, they're not getting me the K1. Like, what do we do here? And she was like, honestly, if it's better just to file your taxes right now, and with like how small, the fact that historically there was no profit, it's not going to really impact you. Like that was her interpretation of it for me within that circumstance. But again, it's what's the order of magnitude we're talking about here, and that I think would in general kind of inform
Great.
what level of response is necessary.
Remember, did say it's a six-figure investment, so it sounds like
Mhm.
maybe some good action is worth like
Yeah.
pursuing there. But
Yeah.
it seems like we have some other questions here in the chat too, and maybe some that are also like a little bit broader for the folks. Like maybe if we get more into specific questions towards the end too, that are like into the nitty-gritty of someone's specific scenario, so that if anyone needs to drop off, they can for those. But I also know, Morgan, I don't want to distract from, I know you were about to share a little bit more too. So decide if you
Yeah,
want to go
great.
questions or if you want to keep going where you were going.
Yeah, no, let's keep going with questions to respect the people that are here now. So, yeah. Um, yeah, and Lisa, the shame and confusion, um, you are in you are in the boat with so many people. That's definitely the feelings that come up a lot around this. Um, and again, I would just reiterate like the having having some of the distance between the emotions and you of like understanding this is not a failing of you, it is just different knowledge. And that the should around being able to do the bookkeeping is not rooted in like anything that actually reflects bookkeeping and taxes. um, and the place through, like, I mean, with bookkeeping and with everything, like the way through is always curiosity, right? And so where I see like clients that are having bigger emotions around engaging in the bookkeeping, one of the best things is like, what's a question that you have, right? And it can either be um, when you're looking at your reports of like, huh, why is advertising this high this month? And just going into that line and like looking at it, right? And just having that curiosity and going, huh, let me put this piece together, or like if you're looking at your balance sheet and you're looking at current year earnings and you're like, what is this? Click into it, like click into that amount, start seeing if you can put the pieces together. and just go, huh, what's in here? That like, huh, what is this approach really helps with the process of like building the muscle and building the engagement with your nervous system.
Yeah, and if I could, since you called out my comment, one thing I think I'm hearing you saying, you can uh, let me know if I'm on the right track. In response to that, some of that fear or anxiety is that there's more agency here than you think. So when you talked about bookkeeping is not just, you know, yes, no, putting in a number, that when you look at it, you're looking at what are we trying to do here? You're looking at gray areas in interpretation, which is of course like why, tax loopholes exist, just because there's gray areas, but that you're trying to do something. You're not just like trying to not get in trouble, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that like there's a lot more agency here. Um and and one of the things is that like when you Google, bookkeeping categories or like what business expense categories do I need for my business? I have that in there too twice. But like right when you Google that, you're going to get a whole bunch of lists and they have a lot of the same categories in there. And that is generally going to be where um there's the most tax precedence. So like meals is a really good example of this. The tax law around meals has been litigated from here to the moon and back, and like that's pretty set, right? Like when you look up, bookkeeping categories, meals is always going to be there. And so that can also be one of the cues to you of like, okay, if it's showing up again and again and again across like all of these different lists, it's probably litigated pretty extensively. Like that's probably a pretty set piece. Um, and then again, like going to the IRS website, putting in your tax form, and then it will have the instructions, and each line has the IRS definition there. So, like in the Schedule C instructions, when you get to the meals line, that instructions is pretty, the parameters of that are pretty clear, right? And so that's another way to like start engaging with it is just taking your time and reading the instructions. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah, and then Lindsay, I love that's the other thing is that like when you start building up and doing the bookkeeping yourself, um, it it does give you a lot of clarity. And so sort of the journey that I see all of our clients taking. Um, I'll outline this. And so starting with mindset, like the clients that come to us that feel unworthy of making money or earning money or have big like money mindset issues or are you open your bank account and like just your nervous system goes "Ah!" Right, mindset is this starting place and that um you have to work through some of this like mindset and nervous system regulation to be able to even engage with the bookkeeping, right? Like the clients that come to us that are like super they will want to work with us and then never show up. They will never give us the information we want. They don't just like we can't even engage in the process of partnering to work together. So that's sort of the baseline is like working on mindset and working through money stories, working through, the nervous system and money um interaction and like getting to a place where you can actually engage with the bookkeeping. And once you move through that, then you get to typically a cleanup phase of like, okay, I'm ready to engage in this process. Now I have a year's worth of bookkeeping to get through. Right? And so then it's the process of like, all right, now I have to dive in and do, a whole backlog of data, right? A whole backlog of bookkeeping. And in this space, we're still in a like reactive and retroactive place, right? We're looking at what happened in the past and responding to that. And so once you work through a cleanup, right, you get everything caught up, then you can move into an ongoing bookkeeping cadence, right? And so this is where you're going in on a regular basis, you're doing your categorizations, you're reconciling your bank accounts, you're looking at your reports. And there's sort of like two divergences that you can do here. One, you can sort of stay in this monthly maintenance, ongoing bookkeeping, and think about bookkeeping purely from that compliance perspective of like, what do I have to do to make the IRS happy? And that's like a perfectly, you can keep doing that for however long you want to keep doing that. That is perfectly fine. But there's also a switch into what I call management bookkeeping, which is how do we stay compliant with the IRS, but then how do we create some customization within your bookkeeping that reflects your specific business operations and starts giving you meaningful data to move into that forward-looking position, right? And so sort of the next stage from the ongoing bookkeeping, we're going to take a little detour to systems and like creating a system where like you think through who are all of the people and what is all of the technology that touches money in this business. And then how can I make that information flow through all of those touch points in a smooth and consistent manner? Right? So that can be integrations, making sure that your bank accounts are connected to your bookkeeping software, making sure that your payment processor is connected to your bookkeeping, making sure that if you have payroll is integrated with your bookkeeping. If you have someone making purchases in your business, that they are communicating and sending those receipts in the same way to the same point person every time, that they have an operating procedure to follow, right? That if there's someone else in your business creating invoices, we see this a lot with service-based smaller companies, that person creating the invoice is communicating that into the bookkeeping software in the same way each time, right? And so then you're starting to get that system working for you so that you're doing less of the like manual data entry. And now you can then shift into the strategic leadership where you're using management level bookkeeping to look forward and go, what about this? Let me try a new marketing technique and get real-time data about how that's working and how that's impacting my overall bookkeeping. Let me get really curious about, instead of having one wages and salaries account or one professional fees account, let me separate these out into sales and marketing, into admin, into client service delivery or, product, delivery. And now let me see how does that labor split out for my business, right? And now that I have that data, what do I want to do about it in the future? And so that you get to that strategic leadership, that management level bookkeeping is about being proactive, about thinking about the future instead of being in that retroactive or historical looking perspective that the cleanup and the mindset, the cleanup and the ongoing bookkeeping can be. So, um, so yeah, that was I love to hear. Like my goal is that we get everyone who wants to be in that forward-looking place there. So it sounds like you're there, Lindsay. That's great.
Thanks. I just had a quick question right after that, and it's very like simple. Like, do I need, when we split our personal and business accounts, do I actually need to use a business checking account and a business credit card, or can I just have a separate bank account? Because the business checking and business credit cards tend to have more fees associated with them than personal checking.
Yeah, yeah. So it really is best practice to have that separate
For
business
sure.
checking account. Um, I do know of some small, so Relay is one of my um favorite like small business checking accounts, and it doesn't have any monthly account fees. It does have a monthly fee for their advanced bill pay module. Um, but that's one that I really like for small
Is
business and not having fees.
okay. Is there like, I have a business checking account with Chase, but like I could easily, and my personal checking account with Capital One, but like I could easily have a personal checking account with Chase and just designate that my business checking account,
You
right? There's no tax problems with that.
tech Technically, it should be a business designated account.
Okay.
Yeah, and partly too, so there's two prongs of that. One is that banks, if they find out you're using it for business, they will like shut you down because of the liability. But two, it is because of the liability that like having it in the personal account does technically title it to you personally, and so that makes it subject to any like legal action. Um, yeah.
Cool. That answers my question. Thank
Awesome. Yeah. Um,
I'll also just chime in as a Relay user who was like, what the fuck do I
oh,
use? Oh my God, wait, I shouldn't say that word on a recording. Wow. Anyways, but
okay.
like what should I use for yeah, bleep it for this? And was very overwhelmed at the choices. And I do think one thing that I found very helpful about Relay was all the rules I can set up because I also have a Capital One personal account. So also when I'm like paying myself, there's just so many amazing rules you can set up in the background that like my money is working for me without me even having to move it myself. So yeah, one thing to keep in mind that I think Relay does well. I'm sure other tools do well, but it was something that I was glad I took the extra like 15 minutes to set up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those rules so much. It makes
I
my
could
life so easy.
imagine. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's nice because you can set up the multiple accounts. So like even I have a rule that like things then go to a tax account, like a savings tax account right away from Relay. So then when I go to pay my quarterly taxes, they're just sitting right there for me.
You ever heard of Row?
I haven't, no.
Okay, like RHO. I was curious because of what you think, because they're also kind of like this automated business account and they don't have any like monthly fees or like wire fees or any of that stuff. I was like contemplating switching to them. Oh,
Oh,
they bounced so many wires.
interesting.
Okay, thanks, Elena. I had another question about taxes. I think what I'm finding difficult is I have I have a retail business, so I pay obviously sales tax every quarter. And I'm just curious because mentally I don't actually know how much I'm going to owe until my accountant does the quarterly sales payment at the end of every quarter. Is there a way you recommend? And then, you think you have money, but you don't actually have money. It's like play money. So is there a
Yeah.
way you recommend kind of like going about somehow like setting aside like that sales tax?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of different ways to handle this. And I have so much to say about sales tax. We have one of our clients is registered in 43 states. So I have done sales tax in almost every single state. Um, but from like a management of that, what is your POS software?
Shopify.
Okay. So Shopify Does have a feature that some of our clients have turned on where it creates a bank account for you that's specifically for sales tax and will move the sales tax amount collected from your Shopify sales into that bank account.
Oh, that's exactly what I need.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's one thing that I would say. One thing to know around sales tax is that Shopify does not calculate it well. Um, it's so there's I forget, it's either 14,000 or 16,000 different sales tax jurisdictions in the US, and all of them have different laws. So Shopify takes a very broad perspective
Yeah.
to calculating the tax liability. Um, but so we use a third-party app called TaxJar to calculate and
I've
remit.
heard of that. It's just it's too expensive for where I'm at. It's more like even if it's like not completely accurate, but at least it's putting something aside so that at the end of every
Yeah.
quarter, I'm not like, wait, why did I just lose $10,000? Because I thought it was like real money, but it's actually just
Yeah.
tax money.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'd say the bank account is a good one. And then
Okay.
one of the other things that you could do is that you can pull up Shopify reports about the sales tax collected and maybe just like once a month check in on that report of like, okay, how much is the estimated liability at this point?
Yeah.
Right? Because it'll probably be a couple $100 off, but not like
Not
thousands of dollars
massive.
off.
Yeah.
And so that can give you a good perspective of like, okay, what's the potential impact here at the end of the quarter?
So would you recommend doing that bank account route or like is there I don't even know if there's like a business such a thing as business savings account, but or would you recommend like doing that and transferring into like a savings account?
Well, so I would say that using the Shopify, because it's like an actual bank account with a routing number and checking number,
Oh, okay.
is that's going to be the most automated way, right? Because otherwise, what you're looking at is creating a separate bank account that you then every month
Have
let
to
me pull
like,
up this report
yeah.
and manually move it. The potential, um, the place where this can get caught is that if either you or your bookkeeper don't know that that bank account, there's not an integration between that bank account and Xero or QuickBooks. So if it's not on your bookkeeping reports, then you're never going to record the payment of the sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so what'll be important is getting that bank account like added into your balance sheet
Yeah.
and then also manually recording the payment of the sales tax so that you're lowering the liability
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
then getting the statement or the balance correct on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
totally. Yeah, great question. Um,
Morgan, I want to make sure we get to Beth's question. And I also, like,
yeah,
before we leave, want to just like plug into like, it's October. Like, what are the things that, like, in this moment are
yeah,
important for everyone here to kind of be thinking about going into the new year? So I want to make sure we leave some space for that. But maybe we start there and then we'll get to Beth's question. Her question is around quarterly tax payments. When you have
yeah.
regular revenue, or we can, whichever you want to start with.
Mhm.
A
Yeah,
regular revenue, like what is that right balance of putting things aside versus having the cash on hand?
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah. So okay, so now is the time to start thinking about 2025 bookkeeping. Like if you haven't, so like first off, if you're in the place where you're like, oh, I've been avoiding this, you're going to set yourself up so much better if you start engaging with that process now. Right. And so that either means doing the mindset work to do the bookkeeping yourself or reaching out to bookkeepers now. Like we have kicked off tax season. That happened October 1st. Most of the other firms that I um, know or work with, they all kicked off tax season um, in October already. Um, So if you want to work with someone, now's the time to engage them. January is probably going to be too late. Um, and then the other thing to be doing between now and December, right, is making sure that your bank accounts reconcile. So like get your bank statements, go into wherever you have your bookkeeping software and use their reconciliation module to make sure that the statements match what's in the bookkeeping file. That's gonna like set you up the best. Um, if there's like a big question that you have, you're like, I'm not sure how to handle this specific category or this, excuse me, this specific expense. Um, now's the time to like start Googling that, start like familiarizing yourself with the language to figure it out. Or again, doing a consult with someone around that. Um, and then it's just like staying up to date, right? Like making sure the next 3 months you're mostly staying up to date, that like if you've been behind, um, that you keep engaging with that a little bit so that when it comes, you know, January 30th or January 22nd, whenever they open up the to accept the filings, you're set up well to be able to file your taxes and have that like time um to go through the process of filing your taxes and like giving yourself that space. So that's like top line stuff that I would say. Um, and then Beth, regarding your question around quarterly tax payments. So this is another example where there's a whole bunch of interpretations. Um, and there's a whole bunch of like different ways to cut this apple. So when it's irregular, um, the thing in general that I see as sort of works the best is set money aside monthly. Like at the end of every month, go in and review and see, okay, what are we looking at? And then there's several different philosophies about like how much to do that. Um, and so like I know some people say do 30% of your net profit. So income minus expenses equals net profit. You can't see the bottom hand here. And that taking 30% of that. That does require you to do um your bookkeeping and like have all of your bookkeeping up to date, have all of your expenses, all of your income, categorized and taken care of. Um, but that's one methodology. And then another methodology, and Profit First uses this, is take a like smaller percentage of your gross revenue, the like top line income coming in. And that amount differs. So that's anywhere between 5 and 10%, kind of depending on your state. So for instance, I used to live in a very low income tax state. I was doing 5% of that, gross, the total income coming in, right? So like if someone paid me, if I made $10,000 in a month, that we would take 5% of that and put that into tax savings. Now that I've moved to a state with higher income tax, I'm putting more in. I think I'm doing like 10% right now. And that's just been I've been like finding what works for me with that percentage. But that doesn't require you to have your bookkeeping entirely done. It just requires you to know how much did someone pay me this month. Um,
That's
yeah,
so helpful. Yeah. And I've
awesome.
been like holding way too much every month. So like it just frees up cash for me.
Yeah. And one of the things to know is like, in terms of like fear of taxing agencies, I find that a lot of people are like very, very afraid of the IRS when actually they are of the various taxing authorities, they are the easiest to work with if you show a willingness to work with them, right? Like you can file for a payment plan and do like $10 per month for as long as it takes you. And they're like, great, we love that. So the IRS is one where like is actually sort of the authority I'm the least concerned about. State income tax, they tend to be a little bit more rigid and like a little bit less flexible, I find. And so that's where I like if personally, if I had to choose between making a state estimated tax payment and a federal estimated tax payment, I'm making the state one because they're just a little bit more inflexible. And then sort of the top of the pyramid is sales tax authorities and sales tax audits. That is where it gets very stringent and like there's no, they will nickel and dime every penny. So that's my internal pyramid.
Amazing. Well, I cannot believe it's already been our time together. Thank you so much, Morgan, for this. So many good questions, so many good answers. Thank you, everyone, for being so open and honest and asking these questions. And I dropped how to connect with Morgan inside of Circle. Of course, I'm sure on LinkedIn and her website, you could find how to email her as well. So please know that, yeah, she is a lovely member of the community, and you can find her inside a Circle. And just so appreciate everyone taking a little bit of time out of their Wednesday to come hang out. And if there are if there's anything that you want to drop into the chat, something that you learned to shower Morgan with a little bit of confetti, this was great. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Morgan, is there anything else before we drop that you wanted to shout out?
Yeah. I mean, thank you for being here. I'm really excited about this. I know there's a couple of questions I didn't get to into the chat. So if you want to send me a message either through email or through the Circle community, I'm so happy to respond to that. I love talking about this. I'm like super passionate about it. So that's fun for me to answer your questions. And then yeah, if there's any if you want support with your bookkeeping, of course, I would love to work with other Dreamers and Doers members. And so the best way to start that conversation is to go to the contact page of our website, honestlybookkeeping.com. And then if there's any questions that pop up for you after this, again, my DMs are open. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. So.
Amazing. I love like the feeling of feeling someone else's passion, like that secondhand passion, even though it's not what I'm passionate about. So thank you so much for sharing it. Oh my God, look at you with the confetti.
I know, it was great.
Wait, I've never done that. Why is mine not working? I just look like a loser. Okay, I'm gonna have to work on
Oh,
that.
there's
Maybe I
some
need to turn
like
it on.
great ones if you have not yet like
Oh my God, I need to turn
experimented.
something on because I need that. I was like, are you saying goodbye? And then suddenly there was confetti. All right, next
Oh yeah,
time.
you can do all sorts of things.
Wow.
Amazing.
Well,
Oh
thanks
my
for being
gosh.
patient with me. Oh my God.
See?
Like, what's
It's always
wrong?
funny
Okay.
watching everyone. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, it's
feature
too
you
good.
have
All
to
right.
turn
Well, thank
on.
you all. I will hopefully see you again soon. And
Thanks,
have a great rest
Morgan.
of your Wednesday. Bye,
Thank
crew.
you.